say nice to see you, good to be seen by you, and good to be heard by you in all the places where we are. If you happen to be watching on the live stream just a few minutes ago and it was silent and me staring frantically at my computer screen, I mistakenly hit the go live button, 40 minutes before the podcast and live stream was supposed to start. So this is for real. We are really, really here. I'm Doug Padgett. I'm here with Massimo Faggioli, and he is an author of a book that I'm so excited to talk about. In fact, I went around on Facebook and tried to find the publicist and said to Kelly, hey, I would love to talk to Massimo about this book, because he's written a book called Joe Biden and Catholicism in the United States. And it's pressing for us in the conversations that we want to have around here on the Vote Common Good podcast. Of course, we think about politics and faith and the role that they play in creating the common good. And we like to say we want to know what's happening in the world and approach the world with our open eyes to see what's going on in the world, and then to ask, how does it impact us and how can we be engaged in it? We see ourselves trying to stir up a group of positive common good activists around the world. And so when we find other people that are doing such great work in thinking about faith and politics, we of course want to talk to them. So Massimo, congratulations on the book. I understand it's just newly out, right? Is this release week, or is release week still coming?
It was released on Inauguration Day, on the 20th of January. So it was timely, timed very, very accurately.
Great. Well, congratulations on it. And give us a little background. So you're a professor of religious studies at Villanova University.
Right.
And so for people that don't know about Catholic colleges and they don't know about Villanova, can you give us a little context of Villanova and where you are and what that means to be a professor of religious studies in a place like that?
Sure. So Villanova University is a Catholic university that is run by a religious order of the Augustinian fathers, and it's in the Philadelphia area, and it's more than 180 years old, and it's one of the 200 and plus Catholic colleges and universities in the United States. It's the most important network of Catholic colleges in the world. And it's known for basketball, Villanova, as you all know, probably.
Yeah, right.
But there's much more going on. And I've been there since 2016. I'm Italian. I'm a church historian, and I teach in the theology and religious studies department. And I teach courses for undergraduate students and for graduate students for the master's level and for our PhD program.
And people who take programs like you're in there at Villanova, and I do want to talk to you about the different orders in Catholicism, because I think that's just interesting. Well, of course, Catholics love to talk about it, but to non-Catholics, they don't often know about the way that the Catholic faith is organized by these orders. But people who you're working with, the students that you're engaged with who are taking master's degree programs, what do they go on to do? Who are the people that you're teaching? What's in their plans?
It's a very good question. So first of all, the university is open to students of all backgrounds, Catholic, non-Catholic, Muslim, Jews, Buddhist. We have many students from Asia. And the undergraduate students take theology courses for their core requirement. And then the graduate students for the master's program and the PhD, they chose to take our courses in theology from our program. And usually master students are interested in doing ministry work. And so it can be hospital chaplaincy or prison ministry or social work in a Catholic and non-Catholic institutions, organizations. Mm-hmm. And the PhD students, they are interested in pursuing an academic career. So they want to get a PhD to be able to apply to teaching positions or in various institutions that now are interested in experts in theology, because it has come back also on the political level, as we all know.
Yeah. So for people who don't follow the Catholic structure, there are orders, and orders to a Protestant they might call them denominations. I know you don't really talk about them that way, but they have a particular structure to them. So people might know, as you mentioned, the Augustinians or the Franciscans are quite famous now because of the Pope, or the Benedictines or the Jesuits. All of those groups, they have different schools and they have different communities. Can you just say a little bit about those, and where Joe Biden finds himself in his own faith tradition? Like how do those function inside of the Catholic structure and the Catholic orders?
Sure. So the religious orders in the Catholic Church are a medieval invention in the 12th, 13th century, more or less, and it's a particular way of training and of employing men and women that have a vocation according to a special charism, a special message, a special emphasis on spirituality or on theology. And so, as you have said, the most famous now has become the Society of Jesus, Jesuits. So because Pope Francis is a Jesuit, and by the way, the Jesuit colleges in the US are the single largest network of one order. So, but there are also Franciscans, Benedictines, and so the, the governing structure of all these different orders tends to be very similar. So they have a superior or a general, and there's a national level or regional and the global one. So what's different is what they study, information, what they do when they're ordained, what is their kind of lifestyle and of charism that they bring in the Catholic Church and in society at large.
Hmm. It's really quite fascinating when people think about Catholics. Sometimes they'll just think on a spectrum of like conservative Catholics or socially engaged Catholics or something like this. But there's more than that inside of Catholicism, right? There's Catholicism. Well, if you're an outsider, can seem like it's kind of just one group, but it's really a sophisticated ecosystem of belief and believers and communities all over the world.
It is. So the way of dividing Catholics in two parties, I mean, conservative or social, so progressive, is a very American syndrome. It is really part of the two-party system. So here there are religious orders that are more theologically or culturally more traditional, and others that are more progressive. But thank God, in the Catholic Church, there's no formal division between those who are more progressive, more traditional. And in one same religious order, you always find members that are a little bit more progressive, a little bit more conservative. So it's the importance of Catholicism is the opposite and the rejection of exactly the idea of dividing everything in parties.
Ah.
That's why Catholicism in the US has such a complicated life, because Catholicism is the antithesis of sectarianism, of I don't like what's going on and I'm leaving and I'm creating my own church or my own group, my own. So Catholicism has a very strong emphasis on being one, big tent, staying together, quarreling, fighting, but remaining in that big tent.
I see. And the reason I bring this up is because some of the news that has come out about Joe Biden being a Catholic, and it's part of the media's interest in trying to understand how to talk about religion, right? Is that priests and some maybe even bishops have said that Joe Biden should not receive communion as a Catholic in good standing, I think might be the language, because of his support for pro-choice policies in the United States. So there's this argument that pops up in the media that people inside the church are saying, hey, there's insiders in this world that are in good standing, and there are outsiders no matter what they say, and Joe Biden is put on the outside. And that has created a particular kind of news story, but also real struggle for people inside the Catholic Church, hasn't it?
You're right. So this issue came up recently, but actually it's not that new, because we saw that already in 2004 when John Kerry, the other Catholic candidate for the Democrats in 2004, was running. And a few bishops said that John Kerry, being part of a party that is the embodiment of the pro-choice culture, should not receive communion. And so we have seen this coming back in these last few months, honestly, from a small group of bishops and of Catholic intellectuals. This has created some embarrassment within U.S. Catholicism lately, because the Catholic Church in this country, as in any other country, has a national conference of the bishops. And the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops created in November a special secret group to deal with this issue. And we have learned 2 weeks ago that this group has been disbanded without making any decision, also because it was a very strange group, because in the Catholic Church, those who have the authority to decide if one individual Catholic can or cannot have communion are the local bishops of the church where this particular Catholic lives. And as it happens, from this special group of the Bishop Conference had been excluded both the Bishop of Delaware, so where Joe Biden lived before becoming president, and the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. And so they were excluded. So it's clear that this group had no mandate, had no jurisdiction. So the U.S. bishops will continue to raise this issue, because for a few of them, or many of them, Joe Biden is mostly, if not uniquely for some, about abortion. Okay, but actually this is not something that the National Conference of Bishops can decide. Only the local bishop can decide. And we know that, and it's on the record, that the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., Cardinal Walton Gregory, has said on the record that he has no intention to deny Joe Biden the Eucharist. And so this is really part of a public dispute within Catholicism. But again, it has come back in such a way because Joe Biden has been elected. But I mean, John Kerry was subject to this kind of thing 16 years ago. A big difference is that back then, John Kerry did not try to defend his Catholicism. Which is something that Joe Biden has decided to do, and not to issue a rebuttal to U.S. bishops, but he has said many times that he's Catholic, and he hasn't hidden that part of his identity, of his life. So this is something that I talk about in the book, because it's the first time that a Catholic in the White House stands up for his faith, meeting the challenge of some Catholics who say that he is actually not a Catholic.
Yeah, and this is really the thing that's different about Biden, right? Not only is the pushback from people in the Catholic communities, but Joe Biden is, as they like to say, wearing his Catholicism on his sleeve. Like, he is out saying on a regular basis that his faith is important to him. And that's been really important to a lot of voters. The work that we do at Vote Common Good was trying to ask faith voters to make the common good the voting criteria, and to specifically bring an end to what we saw as real hazardous leadership from Donald Trump and the way he was president and his policies. But for other people, they don't see this as particularly good news. They get really nervous when they hear that a politician wants to make their religion more outward and to be something that guides them and to drives them. So before we talk about that side, the concern that some people have of Joe Biden saying something like, I want to restore the soul of America. Some people find that's really good news. Others, of course, get concerned about that kind of language from an elected official. What's going on with Joe Biden is not all that new because there's a lot of Catholic elected officials, even at the federal level. Nancy Pelosi is one who's famous for her own faith and that she talks about it. And people ask all the time, at least to me, and I'm sure in the work that you do, you hear it all that much more if you talk about politics and faith and Catholicism especially, and also some with evangelicals, but specifically with Catholics. In fact, one of the comments already on the live stream from Ken is, how can someone be a Catholic and support abortion? And I'll say, as a Christian, I'm a pro-choice Christian. I think that women have the right to choose, and the government shouldn't interfere with that choice. But people do not understand. There's a lot of Catholics who really are just flat out confused. Now, some are just obstinate, but a lot are really flat out confused because they've been told by their own priest or by their own people in their own communities that to be Catholic, you have to hold the view that the Catholic Church holds, and that is to reject abortion. And therefore, as a candidate, how could you possibly be for a policy that differs from your church? How is that even possible? So I don't know if I framed the question well enough as you would understand it in the work that you do. But this is a real question for a lot of people. Some are using it politically. They just mean anyone who disagrees with us on the issue of abortion is not truly Catholic or a good American. But other people are more just confused about how that can possibly be. Do you have much to say about that, and do you address that in the book?
Sure. Well, I do talk about this in the book, and this is a very complex question. So here, I just want to make a few distinctions here. So here, first, it is legitimate, and actually, it's a good thing that that Christians or voters, they question the position of a politician and of a party on life issues. That is also my concern, because I think there is a certain extremism in many different voices on that issues right now. And so this is, it's very natural to have questions on that. Second, so here Joe Biden has never challenged the teaching of the Catholic Church on abortion. He has always said, I respect that. And by the way, in the Italian newspapers today, there is an interview with former Pope Benedict XVI, who talked about Joe Biden and says, I know Joe Biden is personally against abortion, but his party is not. Okay, so it's one distinction here. So here Joe Biden has said repeatedly, I'm personally against abortion. I respect the teaching of my church, but as a Catholic, I cannot impose on the whole country the teaching of my church. And so this is important because this is a very Catholic way of understanding the task of a Catholic politician in a multicultural, multi-religious society. And so it's making a distinction between what I believe, what my church believes, and what can be applied to an entire nation. So where not everyone is Catholic. Okay. Mm-hmm. Third distinction is this. So in America here, we are used to put things in black and white, left, right, Democrat, Republican, pro-life, pro-choice. Actually, if one studies the different kinds of legislations in the world about abortion, there is a very long series of options for legislating about abortion. So one extreme could be abortion is always legal, no limits, no conditions, no requirements whatsoever. And the other extreme could be abortion is always illegal, no exceptions, no rule, it's always illegal. So here the whole question is where you individually and where you as a politician, you put yourself in that spectrum. Okay, so here there is one distinction that one could be personally against abortion and knowing that the only way to reduce in time the number of abortion is to make abortion legal, and at the same time to create policies that make that choice not the first one or not the only one for women, but there are alternatives. Okay, so this is, I understand that this can sound academic, but this is very important to understand that it is possible, in theory, for a Catholic voter who's pro-life to support a politician who is in favor of legal abortion. Okay, so here the whole problem is what is the argument and the policies that these politicians is advancing and is voting for. Okay, but it's not thinkable that a pro-life voter can vote only for someone who can advance policies that exactly mirror the position of the Catholic Church. This has never happened, will never happen, okay? Because politics, it's about compromise, and it's about reaching certain goals in very complicated ways that not always reflect the exact teaching of the Catholic Church.
Well, that's very well said, and I think right. Let me ask it the way I think a lot of voters do. That being the case, what difference does it make then if the guy's Catholic, right? Like, in other words, if his faith doesn't drive the decisions that he's going to make or the laws that he's going to support or the policies that he's going to put into place, because he can't allow his Catholicism to affect his policies because we live in a pluralistic society. Some people would argue, well, then what difference does it make? Like, all we want then, we don't care who the person is. And I heard a lot of religious people tell me this when they wanted to vote for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden. They would say, I don't care who he is. I don't care about his faith. All I care about are the policies that he wants to put into place. No matter what drives those policies, no matter where they come from, no matter the deep well or the shallow pond of the rationale that this comes from, all I care about is the outcome, not the person. So how do you how should people, or how could people think about this if they hear, hey, you can't let your Catholicism drive your policies? And then they say, well, then let's not worry about the faith of the person, or the quality of the person's faith. Let's only care about the policies that they advocate for.
So this is a very good question, and it's a legitimate one. So here there is, of course, a question of what is the influence of one's background, cultural, moral, and religious, on the way not just he or she legislates, but a leader sets the tone of an administration, of a country. Governing is also, in large part, about creating a certain moral discourse, what we care about, why we care about. And so this is very important. First. Second, so here Joe Biden has talked about his faith in a complex way, and mostly or often with an emphasis on the idea of the common good, which is a Catholic technical term, which means that we are in one boat, or we should be understanding ourselves as everyone in one boat. Nice. And so there is a fabric of our nations or of our countries that if you pull one end too strong, in the end, everything will get unraveled. And so this is very strong and deep in the Catholic teaching, for example, about capitalism or about healthcare.
Yeah, right.
Now, the whole issue of abortion is different because in these last 50, 60 years, in every country, especially in the Western world, it has become the most contentious issue that is interconnected with issues of new medical technologies and so on, with the liberation of women from patriarchy. It's not something really that plays a central role in the Catholic teaching on capitalism. It does play a huge role in the issue of abortion, and so this is why there has to be more caution from a politician, and there should be also from some church leaders in making the equation. If he or she is Catholic, then he or she should legislate on this. And so the issue of abortion is essentially more complicated.
I see.
And it's an important one. And so here politics plays a huge role. But again, it is fictional to think that one politician could automatically, impose his own personal views, abstract from the consensus in the country and so on, or the views of his her church. If that happens, it's when things get dangerous, usually, because that has been historically one way of autocrats, of despots, of tyrants to gain the support of the church's hierarchies and so on in a very cheap way. So that is always very idiosyncratic. And so you pick some issues that you think will buy you the support of the church, but you stay away from others. It's always happened in that way. So here, again, I have my own doubts on the wisdom of the platform of the party on the abortion issue. But again, it's hard for me to understand that kind of direct equation against Joe Biden. If he's Catholic, then it tends to be much more complicated than that.
Do you think Joe Biden wants this argument in politics? I don't know if you've interviewed him or talked to him about it, even other times in his life, but it almost seems like he wants to bring what you've just described here as this internal conflict inside of Catholicism on thinking about how the faith is going to be for the public consumption and public good versus the private faith experience. That he's very happy to have this argument. He wants this to come up and out. I just think about the things that he got out in front on. Like he got out in front on same-sex marriage. He was out on the issue. He's made the issue of immigration a faith issue. He's made the issue of healthcare a faith issue. Like it seems like other Catholic politicians have tried to keep a separation between these two conversations, sort of the way you framed it earlier. I have my own personal faith. That's what drives me. But, when I put on my legislative mandate, then I have to represent all the people, just like anybody who goes to work and doesn't proselytize in their work environment the way they might in their personal lives. I'm not going to do it through my legislative life. Seems like Joe Biden's doing something else, though. I don't know. It feels to me like he just talks about his faith a whole lot more. He speaks about it the way evangelicals from the tradition I come from do. That he's kind of wanting to nudge the conversation out of that kind of binary. Am I onto anything there, or is that not?
You're right. So this is certainly my hope. I've never interviewed him, and so I think there are conversations he wants to have with fellow Catholics, with Catholic leaders, and so on some issues. I'm not sure he wants to have this particular kind of conversation about abortion. Mm-hmm. Why? Because in American politics, for voters that have a religious background, the issue of abortion has become a dogmatic orthodox issue that is treated as such from both parties, in both parties, and it has become very dangerous for members of either party to deviate just a little from the orthodoxy of the party on that particular issue. We know that. So there is a real punishment that is issued against pro-choice Republicans and against pro-life Democrats. We know that. So I'm not sure he wants to have that argument. My hope is that indirectly, implicitly, he will inject in the debate in the Democratic Party and in the Catholic Church a little bit more complexity and more moral arguments about the whole issue, which is right now, every single time, reduced to a binary caricature. So if you vote for that party or for that candidate, you are either a hater of women or you are a death machine. So this is really not the case. Mm-hmm. It is more complicated. My hope is that as president, having been elected to the highest office, he can use that time to change the conversation a little bit. It will not be easy because, again, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they have developed their own orthodoxy that are much stronger than any Vatican-imposed orthodoxy. Really?
Isn't that interesting that the people that can impose orthodoxy is politics, not religion.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so and I think that's very well said, and I'd imagine that you think the way you may feel the way I do about this sometimes, like, good grief, I wish we could talk about other issues than abortion when we're talking about politics and faith. It is just so dumb. We've spent 32 minutes already, having to talk about how to talk about it, right? It is so dominant currently for a whole lot of reasons. And yet there are many more important parts of the conversation to have about this faith. So let's pivot to another, if we can. And that's thinking about the side of people that I know who really respect the notion that religion is not going to be politicized and our politics are not going to be biased toward a religion, something that's been foundational in the structure of this country. Even though it hasn't always played out that way, we have tended to preference Christians in this country, and we've tended to preference Protestant Christians in this country, and we've tended to benefit, white Protestant Christians in this country. But the notion has been that a religion doesn't get a hands up. It doesn't start with an advantage, and it's not going to be given governmental support. When Joe Biden comes out and says things like, the soul of America, that he wants to revive the soul of America, that lands on a lot of different ways, right? For some people, soul of America just means, the thing that's at the core of who we are, sort of our true Americanaism, and some people felt very good when he, used military force in this last week, in Syria. I felt horrible about that. But they're like, he's like flag and eagle when he says soul of America. That's what he's getting at, Other people are like, no, he isn't. Like he's talking about a religious sensibility that he's trying to find that spiritual side, and people get nervous. Should we be nervous about Catholicism's role in America? And partly because, for people who don't know, our Supreme Court is predominantly Catholic. I mean, overwhelmingly. Proportion of Catholics in America versus proportion of Catholics in government, it's out of whack. Like, why in the world are there so many Catholics in Congress, in the Supreme Court, in the judiciary, and now in the presidency? There's people who get nervous about that. I don't mean the religious bigots who like think that Catholics are under some spell of Satan through the Pope. Like none of that stuff. I'm not talking about that crowd. I'm saying people who are like, hey, I thought America kept our religion and our politics separate, and yet graduates from Catholic schools like yours, people with degrees in Catholicism, people who talk about their own faith, are a small percentage of the population and a huge force in our political life.
So you're right on this. So to get the record straight just a little. So here Catholics are overrepresented, no doubt about that, in the Supreme Court and in the judiciary. And so they are slightly overrepresented in Congress because Catholics are more or less 22% of the population, and in Congress there is 29% of the members that identify as Catholic. So it's the story of the rise of Catholicism in this country. That is the story of these last 40, 50 years. Now, I myself get nervous when politicians in position of power, they talk about faith. I was born in Italy. I came to the US in 2008. And the thing that got me most nervous was this role of faith and of religion in American politics, because this is the trick. In America, in the Constitution, there is a separation between church and state, even if that expression is not there in the Constitution, but this is the concept. But there's never been a separation between religion and politics.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you there because that's a great phrase that's become very important to me.
Well,
separation of church and state is not the same as a separation of religion and politics.
Right, because separation of church and state means that there can be no national church, no official church, no established church. And so that was one way to reject the European example, the Anglican example in Great Britain, or in Italy, or in France before the French Revolution, Spain, and so on. And so that has been established. But at the same time, religion has always played a key role in US politics. I want to quote K. Chesterton, the British writer, who said, America is a nation with the soul of a church. So this is who we are. So now the problem is not in America whether or not you are injecting some kind of faith in politics, because all presidents have done that, all of them. But how you do that? So if it's to create division, if it's to sow hatred for minorities, for African Americans, for Latinos, for women, for non-Americans, or if it's for something else. So here, as an Italian, I know the disasters that the alliance between fascism and the Vatican had created for Italy, or Germany during Hitler, or Spain during Franco. I know that very well. But in America, the traditions of faith have contributed historically to the construction of American democracy. And I believe Joe Biden's role is important, and I say this in the book because he can restore that tradition of an active presence of the religious ideas in American politics at the service of democracy, which means more inclusive, and a reversal of the use that Donald Trump made of religion that was about exclusion and restoring a certain pattern of supremacy in this country, which is something that we assume had been solved in the Civil War, 1865, but actually keeps coming back. So here, one lay member, lay voter, has every right, and I encourage to be suspicious of every politician that flags my faith, my church, and so on. the whole issue is how she does that.
Hmm.
So here, I believe that there is a huge difference between the way Joe Biden has talked about his Catholicism and Donald Trump has talked about Christianity vaguely, I mean, Judeo-Christianity and so on, or other populist leaders like Mr. Modi in India in these last 7 years, who have made a direct appeal to the fascist movements of Italy, Germany in the 1920s, 1930s. This is a huge difference with Joe Biden, how he has framed his values, his faith, and his Catholicism. This is an important difference, I think.
Yeah, that is, it is an important part, isn't it? Because religion all over the world in the last 30 years has become more radicalized and more extreme. And by that, I mean more exclusivist, right? Across the religious traditions, we've seen this. And it's most apparent in some of the faiths that are accessible in the United States. But this is happening around the world, and it's a political influence. I would call it a problem, but it's at least a political influence all over the world. And that leaders are using religion in a way that, as you said, is reminiscent of 70 and 80 years ago, which to a lot of us, we know the history that has brought about. Is the only solution to this, though, that, well, have a good politician that then doesn't use religion for exclusion but uses religion for inclusion? Is that in our democracy, in what we've got going on in the United States, like not in a perfect container, but the fact that, some small group of people seem to be in the pool that are selected to be our representatives, either at the federal level or at the state level or even at the county level. Like, most of us don't run for office. Most of us don't have any influence in our politics. Most of us are voters, and that's not even most of us that end up being voters. So our political system is fueled by a subset of all of us. It's just how democracy is going to work, it seems to me. So is really the only solution to this? Have people with a good, inclusive, kind, common good sort of faith, because that's all we got going for us. Like, the best we can do is make sure we have good people wanting the common good for all of us. Or is there something more that you know about or hope for or think we could do structurally that could be used to address these issues?
So, I mean, the present solution in the American system that is governed by the Constitution and then elections and so on is the worst possible solution, except all the others. So here there is a substantial difference between the American democracy in the United States and other democracies in the Western Hemisphere. So here, for example, Italy right now has a new prime minister who was educated by Jesuits, who's Catholic, and he's a banker, and he has made very few, if any remarks in public about his Catholicism. And that's perfectly fine for Italy. I mean, that works for Italy. In America, the political tradition, which is essentially not just a legal tradition, but it's a moral tradition. So it's a discourse made of symbols, of texts, of liturgies, I think can sustain that. Now, the problem is when even a moderate, centrist Catholic like Joe Biden meets such an opposition. That is the problem, because Joe Biden is not a crazy Catholic dissenter who has challenged the popes and bishops and so on. He is a very centrist Catholic, theologically, devotionally, but that has inspired a certain kind of very virulent and verbally violent opposition. And so this is my major concern. I'm reconciled with the idea that an American politician uses a language that is full of religious. My concern is for what purposes? And honestly, as a believer, it concerns me when that particular politician does that in a totally cynical and instrumental way, as I've seen in Donald Trump, honestly. Because when you use religious symbols and words in public in a cynical way, that does damage to the soul of a people, of a country. It's not like saying other lies or other statements that are non-factual. Lying about God or your religious ideas and so on, it's a more serious kind of lie. It corrupts. And I believe one can agree or disagree with Joe Biden. I believe it's hard to accuse him of being hypocritical or of lying about his faith. This is something that I don't believe can be credibly done, honestly.
So that's an interesting point you're making, that a kind of political lie that uses the divine or God or someone's faith, you're saying is different. It has a different affect. Do you believe that because of the work you do and the anecdotal way you're able to see it? Or is there any studies? Is there proof, I don't know, in some other fashion that says, oh no, we actually know when you bathe political conversation with religious blessing, it literally does something different to the body politic? Or do you mean it as, look, I know the power of religion, I know the power of politics, we can just see this sort of naturally around the world?
Well, so there is one philosophical argument that can be made, but there's also an historical one. What is the effect of using God or the divine or religion cynically for political purposes? It is that it legitimizes any possible thing. Because when you start saying something like, I'm doing this because my God wants this, or my religion wants this, who can stop you? Right? So that has happened forever. We thought after the Enlightenment, after the Civil War, after the Holocaust, that we had grown out of that. Honestly, some of those instincts are coming back. And I just want to remind all of us that the mob that assaulted Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2 months ago, a few of them, when they reached the hall of the Senate, they prayed God and they thanked God for what they were doing.
Oh yeah, we released a video this week that I'd be glad to share with you and have you share that explicitly shows that to make the point.
Because when you start saying God wants this, God wants me to do this, then anything is possible.
Right, your authority has just stepped it up. It's hard to call another authority down, even though our religions do this all the time. I do worry, and I don't know if you do as well, that separate from Joe Biden's faith and Catholicism's influence and sort of ascendancy since the late 60s, when Catholics were very suspect in politics. Now it's sort of the opposite. So a sea change has happened, right? The brackish waters have shifted, and now it's Catholics are overrepresented rather than underrepresented, as was the case for the first 100 years of this 200 years of this country. But I do get concerned that there is so much blessing of God in our society around our politics. There's chaplains of the House and of the Senate. There are prayers that are said before legislation is passed. I mean, not just at the candidate level, like built into the system. There's added 60 years ago onto our currency is, a phrase around "in God we trust." And there's just a deepening in the last 50 to 75 years of more religion into our politics. as opposed to less. And we're seeing this radicalization of people in opposition to one another. I mean,
You're right.
I can attest. I've traveled the country,
Sure.
been yelled at by
Sure.
people who will tell you, and been violently threatened by religious people, because it has become a holy crusade of the politics has become a holy crusade for a lot of people, and not just a political discussion and argument. So religion's on the rise in some places, and on the decline in personal devotion in our country, which is such a confusing, cross current of facts.
Sure. So here, the wisdom of the original mixing of politics and religion in this country, even in the 50s, 60s, was that the religious content of what a president said had to be vague. And so vague meant inclusive. And so here Eisenhower said famously, the whole fabric of our nation stands on a religious basis, and I don't care what the basis is.
Oh, really?
Wow. And he was right. Now, what we have seen lately is that a fundamentalist approach, so my God hates you, right? So this kind of thing. Or the other side, every religious statement is necessarily violent. And I believe that that's not true either, because it can be very inclusive of everyone, of believer, non-believer. It depends on the context, on how you do it. So here there has been a radicalization on both sides. And I believe Catholicism has this anti-sectarian instinct that can keep together a return of faith in the public square and the necessary respect of those who don't want to be labeled as religious, don't want to be included forcefully. And so, but you're right, this is something, so I mean, our politics have replaced our going to church. Mm-hmm. And this is something that has to be managed. And I believe that we have seen the dangers of that with Donald Trump. And I think Joe Biden can restore some sanity to this very delicate balance between religion and politics, a secular soul of this country that has always been there, and a very religious one.
Yeah, and it feels particularly important, and I hope that you're right that's coming. I sort of dream and try to work professionally that 40 years from now, in the 2060 election, someone will look back and say, wow, religion and politics have really changed in America. I wonder what happened in the last 40 years, because we all look back 40 years and say, what in the world has happened? How did it come to this? And I don't think it's, I'm confused actually whether I think it's just forces globally, because you do see this happening all around the world. So there's something that feels like, I don't know, it's not just choices, but you can also trace all of these decisions back to people making choices and particular candidates and how things are talked about. And it feels to me like what you're getting at is, and this was particularly defined with Donald Trump, that he literally said to, especially to evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics, vote for me and you will have power. Like that's not, I'm not understating or anything. He made that deal repeatedly and then told them, you voted for me, I gave you power. There's another way to be religious, which I think is what Joe Biden comes from. And I think it's common good, which is my faith tells me that as a person of faith, I have to say, vote for me and we'll make sure the powerless are considered in all things, right? Now, when religious people see themselves as the very powerless that are being given power, that's where it gets crooked. And that's what is going on with our identity politics, is people that carry all the power in our society are convincing themselves they're powerless and they need the powerful to give them even more power. So we really have this question, and this is, I mean, my own faith teaches me from the Jesus tradition that Jesus is always getting after power. Right? He wants to talk about the issues of power and control and domination, and wants human flourishing to be the call for all human beings and the flourishing of the planet as the point of that human flourishing. So what you want is power to be a benefit and blessing, not power to be beneficial to oneself. But boy, politics is all about 50% plus one, and how do we get control? And, so then someone like me really believes what I just said, also says we have to make sure these Republicans don't get in power because they're dangerous, right? So there's the temptation, right? It's almost, it's our wilderness temptation experience for the way that we're trying to live in the world. And people like you that are doing all of your good work seem to be an important part of that. Do you have any thoughts on that whole power question, and how do you live in a way that's powerless to benefit all, but then realize that in politics it's all about control and who has majorities?
It's it's about control, and you need a majority. And at the same time, it's important to use power in a way that is not sectarian, that is not sending signals to your party only. So this is what I believe is important for a Catholic, because being Catholic should predispose you, against any cynical or sectarian or partisan use of power. So here there's a partisan way of getting power. But there shouldn't be a partisan way of using power. It's different. And so I believe Joe Biden can do that personally. Of course, he has his own party, he has Congress, so it's complicated, but there's a certain Catholic genius that can help him in this. That's my hope, at least.
Well, it's my hope too. So you had mentioned that you teach in the theology and the religious studies department at Villanova. Do you ever talk to the people in the political science departments? And
sure.
Because in so many places, political science departments and politics as a whole are not really talking about the role of religion other than as a voter base, right? Or as a voter motivation, or as a voter subset. There's a different conversation. You can boast about and boost and recruit for people to go to Catholic universities here if you want to. That's not all I'm asking you to say. But is there something that you think, I know we only have a couple minutes left here, but is there something you think we need in our politics that's missing, that some people are advocating for and providing, that bring together a way of being religious and a way of being politically engaged?
So here, I believe that what is most important is to educate ourselves and our students, in my case, so that we have a two-party system. We don't have to have a two-party brain, a two-party imagination. And so it is really has become a straitjacket where everything has become either left or right. So I am a liberal. I say that, but I don't go shopping to that particular shop because I think it's liberal. But this is what we have become. And so we need to educate ourselves to extract ourselves from that totally binary understanding of the whole reality. And this can save us mentally, spiritually, culturally, and in the end, I think also as a nation.
Well, it's such a great call to recognize a two-party system, but not a two-partied brain, soul, person, or maybe even a two-partied country, right? That we know that we have to do it else, in some other ways. Well, Professor, it's been really great to have you on. I'd love to have you on again. I know you have much more to contribute than this book, and this book is a force of nature in and of itself. It's called Joe Biden and Catholicism in the United States. If you're a Catholic, pick up this book. If you're not a Catholic and you want to understand what's going on with faith and politics in America, this one is the one to pick up and to read. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, right on. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hey everybody, thanks again for being along with us today. I thought that was just a great conversation. As you know, so many things happen in the Vote Common Good world. I mentioned briefly in the conversation there that we put out a video this week about the prayer that was said at the Senate. It included a sign-on letter that more than 2,500 evangelical faith leaders have signed, calling out the insurrection. Catholics also have a list like this. There's a movement afoot, and we're glad that you're part of this here around the Vote Common Good world. If you're already all signed up for all of our things at the Vote Common Good world, thanks. You know, we have different conversations. On Monday, we talk about news, and we thought this was newsworthy. On Tuesdays, we talk about politics. On Wednesdays, we take on common good faith. On Thursdays, we dive into particular issues that matter, and we dig into science on Fridays. A lot that goes on. If you're not already on our email list, we'd really invite you to do that. Invite you to get on there, because today, just an hour ago, if you were on our email list, a brand new Common Good News email would have landed in your email box. If you received that email, or if you're going to click over right now and look at it, tell us what you think. We'd love to know. We'd love for you to contribute, of course, your words, your goodwill, your actions, and if you're up for it financially, to the work that we do at Vote Common Good. We have a project called In for 10. Yeah, we're asking people to give us tens of things. We'd like $10 a month. We would like 10 friends of yours. We'd like 10 good ideas that you have. We've got a whole In for 10 project that we're unfolding. So take a look at that. You'll see that there's a chance to make contributions every month and other things, but we're also looking for more ways for you to be involved. And I don't know, I thought that was super fun. I'm going to add Dan in and just see, Dan, do you want to have any little chit chat about any of this stuff? I know that you're not Massimo, but I can't get his name off of there. Well, maybe I can. There we go. Hey, Dan, good to chat with you. Thanks for covering last week. For those that are listening, know that I snuck away in vacation and sat outside for a week, which felt really
my pleasure.
freeing and great. And that was a good conversation, wasn't it?
I loved it. I especially loved his bit at the end. Like, we have to have an imagination that is bigger than the binary of left and right. Thought that was really great.
That's a winner, that line. We have a two-party system, but we don't have to have a two-party imagination. Oh,
yeah.
Someone's going to steal that. I hope it's me. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. Thanks for covering. This is Dan, the one who makes the podcast Beauty Happen. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, you can do that all the places. And if you don't know where all the places are because you're new to podcasts, you can just go to votecommonggood.com/podcast, and we'll take it from there and start putting this in your ears if that's new to you. And we'll be back tomorrow with, why was that clap so loud? But we'll be back tomorrow with our conversation around politics in particular and Rob Ryerson. So to all of you, a common good day to you, and faith, hope, and love for a change, huh? Thanks, Dan.
See you soon.
See ya.